Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be a review of the new Makeup by Mario SurrealSkin foundation. So I went to Sephora last week and got a sample of this. It felt wasteful buying a $40 foundation and a whole fluid ounce of it when I wasn't sure if I was going to love it. So I did try it in the store, got shade matched, which was the shade I thought I was, and the employee was very nice and gave me a very large sample. So I've actually worn this 5 times now, most days lately. And I have enough that I'm going to do an application now, show you what it looks like on my skin, and then talk about my thoughts from using it for the last week or so. I've also already done some wear tests, including one where I wore my favorite foundation, Haus Labs foundation, on half my face and this on the other half, and wore that all day to see how they wear, how the color compares, all of that. So I will include that at the end of the video as well. And if you're new here, welcome. My name is Colin. I am a non-binary Latinx scientist and lover of makeup with a soft spot for indie makeup and colorful makeup. And due to being a scientist, I tend to be very thorough and analytical in my approach to makeup. So I have new content every week and I'd love to have you subscribe. So I have no makeup on right now, so I will be putting this on and then I'll finish my face as well. I just put some brow gel on my brows and I put some of my Haus Labs lip oil on my lips. This is like the second or third one of these I've used. I think this is the second. I'm glad I have 2 more because I love it. It's a little less dark today in Seattle, so hopefully the lighting looks nice. It's been really gray and dark, so I decided to wear something bright today because I feel like I need that. Very much into the dark, stormy weather here. Also, I feel like white works best for a foundation review because it doesn't change the way my skin looks. My skin very much changes depending on what I'm wearing, so it's really funny. I'll wear like a black t-shirt and someone will be like, "You look pale and don't look Hispanic, you're lying about me." I'll get comments saying like I'm lying about being Mexican on my dad's side, and I'm like, no, my father is very much Mexican American, very dark skinned, black curly hair. Like, I'm not lying. Why would someone lie that? I don't know why people feel the need to police other people's existence online, but they do. But I figured white doesn't distort my skin. Like if I wear something too yellow or too green, it makes me look kind of sick. So I figured white would be a good neutral. And like I said in my intro, this might be a long video. It's probably not gonna be like an hour long like some videos, but it should be a little long because I'm not gonna do a wear test today, but I've already done some, and I tend to be very thorough and go over a lot of stuff and have a lot of thoughts. So this is not gonna be a 10-minute video, but I'm not sure how long it'll be. So I filmed with my phone, so I pulled up my laptop to look at the Sephora information for the foundation. So right now this is 4 out of 5 stars. It's $42. You get a fluid ounce of product, standard amount, 30 flexible shades, he says, which they do seem pretty flexible. I thought I was probably 12 olive, and then looking at his swatches, 14 olive actually looked lighter and more olive and less golden. So I was very confused, went to Sephora, swatched both, and 12 is definitely more true olive, 14 is a little more golden olive, kind of like Lisa Eldridge 16 versus Lisa Eldridge 17, where I can use both. 17 is better if I've seen any kind of sunlight, although not really like my tan shade, just like I've been in the sun. And then 16 is me at my palest, which is now. So I went with 12 because it is January. It says it's a natural finish, long wear, medium coverage, hydrating. So I like a light to medium coverage foundation. I like a long wear foundation. I want something that lasts all day. I like hydrating and I like a natural finish. I do have some thoughts about what it says here, but we'll get into that later. Then it says what it is: a breathable, luminous foundation that effortlessly builds and blends it to illuminate the complexion with customizable long wear coverage. And then it's got some highlighted ingredients like grapeseed oil, vegetal squalene, and these perfecting powders that are supposed to help with texture and smooth your face. When you look at the ingredients though, those are really low on the list. Things at the top are things like coconut alkaloids, and a lot of glycerin is pretty high up there. It does have silica in it, so it's definitely an interesting formulated foundation, and I do have some thoughts. It has mica as well. So before I apply it, I do want to talk about my skin type. So I do have pretty normal skin. I don't really ever get dry or dehydrated. I don't really have overly oily skin. I do have pretty oily eyelids and an oily nose, but it's not even my whole T-zone. My forehead tends to not be too oily. And the rest of my skin is pretty normal, not overly oily at all. If I don't shave very well, some things will cling to my stubble, but that's not my skin being dry, that's just the fact that there is hair there. So I don't have super oily skin and I don't really have dry skin. I'm right in the middle, pretty normal with an oily nose. So I did prep today by doing my normal skincare, doing all of that, and then I put my Milk Makeup matte primer on my nose. I did put a little on my forehead too, but I mostly use it on my nose to kind of help with that nose shine. And I've done that with the other times I've worn this foundation as well. Tried it without and with. And my favorite foundation that I've tried in the last few years has been the Haus Labs, which is, if you look at my skin, the Haus Labs kit also says it's a natural finish. Some people say it's kind of radiant. I wouldn't really call it a glowy, radiant finish. It basically looks like my skin does now, just like more even. Like that little bit of healthy glow that comes from my moisturizer and my skincare, I still retain that, but it just like looks like my skin is perfected. So that is my perfect foundation and my ideal kind of coverage, like a very light coverage on days where I'm not wearing any foundation. If my skin isn't too red right here, I really just use my two Kosas concealers. I have one for under my eyes and one for the rest of my face, and I just spot conceal, blend them in where I need to. So that is my perspective and where I'm coming from when reviewing a base product or a foundation. So like I said, I have the shade 12O, and I did swatch 14O and I did put it on my face. And because you can sheer it out, I could have gotten away with either, but 12 seems like a pretty good shade match. And it is an interesting formula. So you can see I've worn this like 5 times or so, and I still have a decent amount of the sample. I don't like full coverage. I don't use a huge amount of foundation. So this was perfect for me. So I'm gonna take a little bit of this out and put it on my hands so you can cut. It's a fairly thick foundation. When you pump it out, when I pumped it out at the store or they pumped it into the little container, it is really thick. It is much thicker than I typically like. It's not as thick as the Kosas foundation, which is almost too thick for me to use, but it's not like the Pat McGrath or the Haus Labs, which are a lot more runny and serum-like in consistency, which is my preference. So I'm just gonna put a few dots of this all over. So shade-wise, it looks pretty similar to the Haus Labs. So in the Haus Labs foundation, I'm shade 260, and these do seem pretty similar. Not exact, but when I had them side by side, it wasn't like stark enough that you would have been like, ooh, what's wrong with your face when I was out. So I'm just gonna blend that in with a brush. I've tried a few different brushes, including something light and fluffy. I've used the Haus Labs brush, I've used my fingers, and it pretty much performs equally well with everything. And then I just have this little pat quad that I'm using as a mirror because it was the closest thing. And it blends out really nicely. And it really just looks like healthy skin when you first apply it. I don't get any kind of overly glowy look, or it does have that mica in it, so you can see it in the bottle. And I don't really notice that in the swatch too much. I think you can after you wipe it off, but I don't really see it on my face or anything else. But on my hand, I kind of saw the mica. Also, this is the first time I'm using my new Sonia G brush, and it is really nice. I I'll have more thoughts on it later once I've used it more, but this is the first time I'm applying a base since I got it. So that was a pretty light layer all over my face. And you can see it has a similar, at this point, a very similar kind of finish to the Haus Labs, a little shinier, but not especially with this direct ring light, but in natural light, it's just a pretty like healthy skin look. My best friend also got a sample and she feels similarly with the overall appearance. So that's like the equivalent of a pump all over my face, and it is definitely shiny and reflective. The mica really reflects light, and one thing I think is interesting is the way it reflects light. It doesn't diffuse it, it really reflects it straight back. So in direct light, it looks very different than in diffused natural light. So I'm very curious about that, and I have thoughts about why a makeup artist would do that, because they work on photo shoots with lots of, well, generally diffused light, but sometimes spotlights as well. But it is very glowy. It is definitely a luminous foundation. I'll apply concealer real quick, and then I'm gonna powder and show you what it looks like with powder. Okay, so I'm gonna use my Haus Labs powder. I only have 2 powders. I've tried this and with the Kosas powder, which is a pressed powder. And it worked about the same with either. So I'm just gonna use this and do a little light dusting all over. I have the shade Golden. And you can see it's still very radiant and doesn't really look powdered at all. I've tried it without powdering and it definitely did not last very well without being powdered. So it says they have powder, like a fine powder in it, that's supposed to control your oil and like help it last. I do not find that it helps it last without also powdering, but I always powder. So if you're someone that doesn't powder, that's something you'll have to think about. So I really love this powder. It's very blurring, it's very soft. It's not overly drying, but it does mattify, but not like overly matte. It's kind of like the Kosas press powder, where it takes away the oiliness without taking away the healthy shine of your skin, which is why I like it. And you can see there's still a lot of glow to my skin. So looking in person, it looks really good, actually, better than it has the last time I wore it. No, it looks about the same as the last time I wore it. Also, looking at myself in my mirror versus my camera, I look way more pale in my camera, so definitely need to adjust the color balance. It just looks like really healthy skin, and I really love the way this looks for the first like 4 hours. Then it starts to go downhill. So I'm not shiny. I mean, I'm shiny, but it's like a healthy glow from within. It's not, I've used some dewy bases where you're just like glowing. This is not that. So if you like an ultra dewy, you could definitely achieve that with this. But if you are someone that doesn't like any kind of luminosity, like you want matte, you're not gonna like this either, because it does have that like healthy glow from within. But it does reflect light interestingly, and I don't think it lasts as well as it should. So I'm gonna give you a close-up so you can see, I mean, it's also reflecting off this ring light, so I'll turn that down a little. You can see my pores look nice, my skin looks really nice. I'm having a good skin day in general, but there is definitely a luminous glow all over. The problem is after you wear it for a while. When I did the wear test with just it looked really nice. I did no primer that first time. The problem, so I wore a mask that time and I ran errands. So I went to Costco and Target and a bunch of things that we needed to do, and I was wearing a mask for most of that because COVID cases are a little bit higher. People are getting sick, the flu is going around. I had the flu, don't want to get sick again. And it definitely wore away on the mask. I did powder it that day, and it wore nicely. Like, it wasn't like there was a giant bald patch where my mask was, but you could definitely tell there was much less coverage and you could see a lot more of my skin poking through on my nose right here and right here. And that was, I only wore it for a few hours that day. It was pretty worn off there, and then I think we were gonna go do something, and then I was like, I'm just gonna wash this off. I then have done a few other wear tests, one just by myself to try out, and then I did two, and then I did two that I have footage of. So I did one day where I wore it for 7 hours. I think the little clip I have is after 6.5 or so. I think I wore it for 7.5 hours because it was 10 o'clock at night by the time I was done, because I put it on mid-afternoon. I was shiny. I was very, very shiny. I didn't look healthy glowy anymore. I looked greasy. And I powdered and it still looked greasy. And then the day that I did a wear test, I did 8 hours that day, and I thought I had a photo from at the end, but I have one from 6.5 hours in, 7 hours, of Haus Labs on one side and the Mario on the other. They're both pretty luminous. The Haus Labs was less shiny, less oily looking, and more just still glow from within, and wore better in my opinion. And it just wears better in general in my opinion. So I do have those clips that I'll insert here and some photos. One thing I find really interesting about this, because its glow comes from the mica and stuff in it, even if you powder a lot, it's still really, really glowy. So there was one day I wanted to see how much I could tame it down. So I normally powder with a brush. I know some people powder with a puff and really press it in. So I tried that. And what that ended up doing was making it really dry looking, but still shiny. And I don't know how I feel about that. Also, I realized TV, normally I have it on like a picture for some color behind me, but I forgot to do that. It looked like around my nose, like all the little like pores on my nose and right here, it looked dry and cakey and gross, and was like kind of dry around here because just pressing that powder in, it like absorbed it, but it was still shiny. So I was both dry looking and cakey and really dewy and glowy, and that is not a pretty look on anyone. I know when Manny Amue just did a video trying this out, and he like really powdered and then did like a close-up on his iPhone and was like, and he looked very, like his skin looked powdered. It had the look of powdered makeup face, but was also still shiny. So it's not just a me thing. And my best friend has tried this as well, and she's kind of torn on it too. She's just on the hunt for like the perfect foundation. So we were hopeful this would be the one. So it's weird. And I also think it's interesting that they call it a natural finish. A lot of foundations lately are calling things a natural finish, and they're all very different finishes. If I was gonna call anything a natural finish, I would say the Fenty skin tint, the Eaze Drop, is like a satin matte. It just looks like skin. That's a pretty natural finish. Lisa Eldridge, also kind of a satin matte, but you can modify and make it more matte or more shiny. Natural finish. The Haus Labs, I would say, some people say it's really shiny and oily. I would say it's a natural, healthy skin finish, which is what I said in my review of that. It looks like my skin. It doesn't look like heavy, it doesn't look like makeup, but it looks like my skin after I've been hydrated and put my skincare on. It has that like natural glow, which this does right now, but a little glowier, a little shinier. Do really like the way it's looking today. But it is already pretty glowy, especially right here. I also think it looks very different with direct light versus normal light. So if I'm just gonna be sitting on the couch or whatever, it looks very different. Well, I think I wore this out and my best friend's worn it to the office, I believe. And I need to ask her, and I will insert something here, how it looked, how she thought it looked under like the fluorescent lights. Okay, so I said I was gonna insert a little clip here, but I texted my best friend and I already heard back some thoughts. So I'm just gonna insert this post thing. So she said that in an office, like overhead light in that kind of way where there's fluorescence everywhere, it looks fine. Kind of like how it probably looked when I got the sample at Sephora and they put it on my face. That's diffused enough. But she did say it looked crazy when she was in the like a parking garage and anything with like direct light overhead but less of them. And I was talking to Hope Mess Tom, similar thing, like if you have direct overhead light and it's not diffused everywhere because of, I think it's because of the mica and the way it reflects light, you look kind of crazy and it's weird and not ideal. So it's not a foundation that looks good in every lighting, which is something that I kind of feared with the mica in it, but now it's confirmed. Okay, back to previously filmed Colin lights, because I have a feeling with the way it reacts to this light and the way it would react to my overheads, it looks weird because like the Nars light reflecting foundation just kind of reflects light naturally in a diffused way. This seems more like directly from where the light is coming from. So if the light's coming from directly above you, it's gonna reflect up instead of this way. And that's not what I want. And it makes me, it's a very weird choice coming from a brand, from a makeup artist. I would expected this to be, especially when it said natural finish, I expected it to be, I saw that it was kind of glowy and had the mica in it, so I expected it to be more closer to the Haus Labs, which it is, but when I say natural finish, I think it's gonna be more like the Lisa Eldridge or something, like just looks like skin, not overly shiny. This is really shiny. This is a very luminous foundation. And as I showed with those clips, it just gets more luminous. I don't think it holds back my oils. I don't think, and now there's a fire truck. So I don't think it's a bad foundation by any means, but I'm really glad that I didn't buy a full size and waste my money on that, or waste that product. That's very wasteful. I think more people should get samples to try out and review versus always buying full-size foundations, because you know, then you see these YouTubers who have 20, 30 foundations and no one needs that many. But I obviously know you can't always get a sample, but when you can, it's useful. So I do like the way it looks. I just don't like the way it wears. If you have really dry skin, I think you will like this. I know Teresa's Dead did a review and loved it, and she has very, very dry skin. So I think this is made more for dry skin people, and I think normal to oily, unless you want a really, really shiny, dewy finish, you're not gonna like it. And it, like I said, it is also a weird consistency where it's like thick but not thick. And Hope Miss Tom and I were messaging about that a few days ago, where I was like, the texture is odd. Like it's somehow thick, but then immediately spreads out in a non-thick way. Like it's just a very interesting formula. And I think it's definitely gonna be a holy grail for some people, just not for me. This is why I try to be so detailed and thorough in these kind of reviews and in my reviews in general, because there's a very big difference between bad quality and great quality versus, which is an objective, like this doesn't work, or this lacks pigment, or it's whatever, burns your skin, versus that's like an objectively bad quality. But then there's the subjective aspect of, does this look nice on my skin? Do I like this finish? Is it the type of makeup I wear? Is it the type of makeup I like? And too often people take their subjective, this is not my style of makeup, and then say it's a bad product. And I will tell you if a product is bad, but I don't ever want to be the one that says like, well, this isn't my style of makeup, so it's automatically bad. I really like the way my skin looks right now. I don't have bronzer, blush, anything on. I will go add that stuff before I do anything else, but I would be fine looking like this, maybe a little bit of something on my, like a little bronzer on my lid or something. It's just so glowy. So, if you really like a glowy finish, and especially if you're on a more drier side of the spectrum, I think you'll really like this, but you have to want a radiant finish. So, and I just think it's a very interesting choice. It's a very interesting formula and a very interesting choice for a makeup artist brand to make it so luminous and make the formula the way it is. So those are my thoughts. I hope this was helpful. Let me know in the comments below if you've tried this or what your thoughts are on it. I think it's a really interesting formula. I just don't think it's the formula for me, but that's okay. But it is a really interesting formula, and I do really like my skin right now. It's just if I'm gonna wear a foundation, I'm not wearing it just to film a video or something. I'm wearing it to go out all day, and I don't want it to, you know, I don't want to look disgusting come 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock. So I just don't think it's for me, but could be very much the perfect foundation for you. And I hope if you do get it, that you love it. So thank you so much for watching. Remember to like and subscribe, and I will see you in my next video.